Yo, everybody, what's up? Listen, I am sorry. I am late. It is 4:22 and I was supposed to be on at 4. LA, golly. LA traffic, y'all. LA traffic. But nonetheless, I am here. Good to see my friend and brother, Reverend Kwame Crosby. I am here. I am on, and I'm late, but I made it. And so, hey, Auntie, good to see you. All right, y'all know I don't like to keep y'all waiting. Y'all know I like to get right into it. Please like, share, subscribe. So, should pastors resign? What do you think? That's an interesting question. If a person has been called to pastor a people, should that person ever resign? And the reason why I'm having this conversation right now is because of an experience. My friend says absolutely not. Because my friend and my brother. The reason why I'm having this conversation right now is because of something that I experienced that I have not talked about. Haven't discussed this publicly, and that was on purpose. You know, sometimes you don't need to talk about things until you honestly feel like you're over them. Sometimes you don't need to engage in conversations unless you feel like you're in a good mental, emotional space to engage in the conversation. So I intentionally didn't say anything about this for about 2 years, but I think I'm good now. I think in a much better space, and I'm also going to talk about this, I think, in a way that that is productive. So before I get into this conversation, my desire is not to mudsling. My desire is not to create any type of narratives that cause people to be looked upon in a negative way. As a matter of fact, I'm only telling the story because I really want to get to the answer. But I think that the telling of the story is necessary in order to explain why I land where I land. So right now you're like, okay, we'll tell the story. Go ahead, be quiet, and tell the story already. All right. So I lived in Atlanta for 16 years. I left California in 2005, moved to Atlanta. I was there for 16 years. I pastored. I was a youth pastor, church planner. I was an assistant pastor while I was out there, and I planted a church and I pastored an established church. So a lot of ministry experience during those 16 years. But after about my 8th year, after in Atlanta, really felt a desire to come back home. And really wanted to be back in Southern California. However, every time I attempted to leave Atlanta and move back to Southern California, the doors shut in my face. And I know that it was God shutting those doors in my face. And I know the guy was saying, nope, not yet, not now. And the door would shut in my face. Well, my mom, who was living in Atlanta as well, she moved out there about a year after I did, decided that she was done with Atlanta. She was moving back to Southern California, back to the city where I'm from, Pasadena, born and raised in Pasadena. She decided, I'm done, I'm out, I'm gone. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a mama's boy. Okay. So that was kind of difficult, right? Now my mom's gone and I'm in Atlanta and doors aren't opening up. And I'm kind of frustrated. Well, I continued to pray and continue to seek God about the next steps, continue to really just sort of, you know, ask God about my future and about what he wanted. And I shared with him what I wanted. And then all of a sudden I ran across an opportunity and prayed about that opportunity that I ran across. It was an opportunity to pastor a church back in California. And I prayed about the opportunity. And here is what made it clear to me that God was doing something and God was kind of turning the tide a bit. My wife, who had been opposed to moving to California. Now, my wife is not from Southern California. My wife and I met in Georgia. So she's not a native Southern Californian. And she had been opposed to moving back to California. But all of a sudden, after talking to her about this opportunity, and after spending time in prayer before I talked to her about the opportunity, all of a sudden her heart softened toward the move. And I knew that was a God thing. I knew it because happy wife, happy life, right? You don't want to move somewhere where your wife she's not in agreement. So her heart softened. I said, okay, maybe God is doing something. Maybe something's happening here. And so I put all of my information in for the position at the church, and things really took off from there. Was contacted by the church, met with the church. I was actually impressed by the way they ran their search process. I've been involved in other search processes, and I was impressed because I felt like they were just real thorough in terms of the business aspect of things, and continue to pray throughout the entire process, because I knew that a move from Georgia to California, I knew that it was expensive. I knew that it was labor intensive. So I continue to pray through the whole process. Now, ultimately, the church voted and they called me to be their pastor. And they contacted me after the vote to call me to be their pastor, and I was elated. But there was just one problem. The church wasn't offering relocation expenses, which is fine, right? The church decides whether they want to do that or whether they don't. That's up to the church. And then it's up to the candidate to determine whether they want to apply and continue. No. It's not somebody like, what? No, the church can determine how they want to conduct their process. And if they're upfront about everything, which they were completely upfront about everything, if they're upfront about everything, then it becomes really up to the candidate as to whether or not they want to continue in that process based upon the the criteria that they lay out. So they voted for me to be the pastor. However, you know that moving cross country isn't cheap. So I said, okay, God. I said, if this is you, What's up, my friend, my brother? Keith is in here. I love you, Keith. So I said, okay, God, if this is you, make it clear, make it evident. All right. Where God guides, he provides. So if this is you, I'm not going to sweat it. I'm not going to sit and be anxious. If this is you, do something. In 3 days, God supernaturally provided the resources for us to relocate. In 3 days, he provided the money to buy dumpsters. He provided the money to even so we were leasing at the time. He even provided money to break our lease. So we actually were able to pay to get out of our lease. So we didn't just skip town, right? And ultimately get evicted, because that wouldn't have been godly. We were able to pay. So God he made it evident. He made it clear. There was no doubt in my mind or in my wife's mind that God was up to something in all of this. So the money rolls in. We know, y'all, I gotta be careful with my hand gestures, because I gotta remember that I have this new camera, and the camera will zoom in based on the gestures that I make with my hand. And so I got to be cognizant of that. So anyway, we secure the monies. We're in contact with the church, kind of letting the church know what's going on every step of the way. We're excited. They're excited. And we move. We make the journey, 2,200-mile journey, out of Atlanta and back to Southern California. We're excited. We're enthusiastic. And we're ready to see what God is going to do in this new assignment. And so now here, as I get into this portion of the story, after coming to the congregation, as I get into this portion of the story, I'm really intentionally going to tread lightly. Because here's the reality, y'all. There are two sides to every story. Okay. And what I'm sharing with you is my side of the story. And I want to be charitable. I don't want to misrepresent anybody. And I don't want to cast an entire church in a bad light. So I want to make that clear. What I'm sharing with you is my side of the story. And I'm not even going to share all of it and the nuances of it, because I don't want anybody to come away from this conversation with a negative view of this church, because things happen for a reason, right? So what I will say is after we got to the church, we were received warmly. Things began well. There was, I would say, a bit of a honeymoon, but not long after becoming the pastor, some conflict started to arise, some disagreements and differences of opinion in ways of thinking, and ways that things should occur, ways that things should happen, communication. I'm not going to get into it. And when I say differences of opinion, it pretty quickly, it became clear that there was a struggle with me getting on the same page with some of the deacons at the church, and vice versa. Me getting on their page, them getting on my page, and fairly early in my tenure there, there was some there was some, should I call it conflict? Yeah, there was some disagreements. Okay. Now, what exacerbated things is that my pastor at the time came to preach my installation. Now, by the time we get to my installation, some of our differences had become pretty stark, and the chasm had grown pretty wide by the installation. Was it irredeemable? No. At that point, what was it? Had we reached the point of no return? I don't think so. But then the installation happened. And my pastor at the time, let's just say that his message didn't go over well with many of the deacons and some of the congregation. He was my father in the ministry. So at my installation, he came in very hot, and he felt the need, because, I talked to him in private and shared kind of my perspective on how things were going. And he did. He came in with guns out. Okay. In defense. He felt like he needed to defend me, and it didn't go over well. And that was really, I think, the point of no return. Things got exponentially worse after that. Now, my installation happened, I want to say 7-8 months after I got there. Okay, 7-8 months after I got there. And y'all, after the installation, it was not fun. And my body began to respond to the stress that I was under. I got COVID, I think, a couple of times that I was there. And so, of course, that has nothing to do with stress. But I have asthma. I'm asthmatic. And my asthma really was dormant for years. Like had it really bad up until age 12. And then it went away. And then I got COVID, and it started to come back. And also something popped up on my screen, y'all. Also, I started to, I went to the hospital. Why is this popping up? An app just wanting to pop up on my laptop. I also started experiencing chest pains and palpitations. And my mentor at the time, he was a member of our church. He was actually the former pastor of the church. He was the pastor of the church before my predecessor. So my mentor at the time pastored the church for years. I want to say 20, almost 30 years. And then another pastor came in who pastored about 14, 15 years. And then I came in. Well, my predecessor had become an interim pastor at a church in Watts, but his predecessor was still at the church, and he was a mentor of mine. Very close relationship. As a matter of fact, today is the anniversary of his passing, so today is a tough day, but very close. Talk once a week. He would encourage me. When he found out that I was, having heart palpitations and chest pains, he was like, "You gonna go to the doctor. You gonna go to the doctor. I'm gonna preach. You gonna go, boy. Go to the doctor." So I did. And so let me try to sum this up. I ended up going to the hospital for 5 days in the midst of all of this stuff. And now you have to understand, like, we attempted multiple times to get on the same page. We had meetings. we had, some of us had individual conversations, but I can't speak for some of the deacons. I walked away from those meetings feeling like we weren't really getting to the crux of the issue, right? I walked away from those meetings feeling like all we've done is put a Band-Aid on things, and we haven't really solved anything. That's how I felt. Okay. They might have felt differently about the meetings, but that's how I felt. Then I ended up going to the hospital, and I was hospitalized for 5 days. And while I was in the hospital, my doctor, I was there for respiratory issues. I had an asthma attack. So what happened was I woke up at 2-3 in the morning and I could not breathe. So it was so bad that my wife had to call the ambulance. And thankfully they came. You know, we live right down the street from Cedars-Sinai. Thankfully they came and rushed me to the emergency room, where they injected me with stuff and put me on breathing machine, and they admitted me. And my doctor said, you know, Isaiah, a couple of things that you need to realize. You've had COVID twice. And so this virus has damaged your respiratory system. And so, you know, yes, your asthma was dormant for years, but this virus has weakened your respiratory system, and your asthma it could be a problem going forward again. And then he said something. He said, Isaiah, what you also have to understand is that asthma can be exacerbated by stress. So now that you know that your respiratory system has been compromised as a result of the COVID virus, you really want to seek to eliminate as much stress as possible, because that could also trigger your asthma. When he told me that, I'd probably been at the hospital about 3 days, right? And so that evening, I started praying, and I was praying and crying, and I was really wrestling with everything that had occurred up until that point, and the entire move, and as I prayed in that hospital bed, I really sensed the Lord say to me at that point, Isaiah, it's time to go. It's time to go. And I felt the Lord saying, you cannot prioritize a church above your wife and children. And so you need to ensure that you are here for the long haul, and nothing is jeopardizing your health in such a way that you are prematurely taken away from your wife and children. And y'all, nobody will be able to convince me that it wasn't God, because after I sensed that the Lord was telling me to release it, I felt peace. I said, okay. Now, mind you, I was bivocational. That's right. The church was half of my income. I had a corporate job as well, but the church was half of my income. And you know that living in LA is not cheap. Okay. All right. Um, I was able to get by in Atlanta on one job. There was no way whatsoever, right? I could make it in LA with just my corporate job. And you don't think that ran through my mind as I'm laying in that hospital bed? So I'm just supposed to walk away from half of my income? Since you're telling me to go so that I can be here for my family, but how am I supposed to provide for my family? How am I supposed to take care of my family? I'm just supposed to walk away from a consistent check that supplements the money that I make with my corporate job? That was a hard question, but I sensed the Lord saying, let it go. And I also sensed the Lord saying, and listen, this was a principle that I developed a long time ago, and I really sensed the Lord reinforcing this principle in my heart and in my mind. I sensed the Lord really pressing into my heart that ministry should never, ever become solely about money. And if my reason for staying was solely because of the check, then that is a poor reason for a pastor to want to continue in that role. Ministry should never reduce to, well, I got to keep doing this because if I don't, then I'll be destitute. When I sense the Lord say, let it go, I knew I was going to be on a faith journey. And isn't that how we're called to live? The just shall live by what? Faith. And I knew, okay, all right, God, okay. So I got out the hospital, and that following Sunday, I submitted my resignation. And I think I gave like a 90-day notice. I think the contract stipulated that in the event that I resign from the church, I have to provide like a 60 or 90-day notice. I forget what the notice was, but I handed in my resignation and said that it would be effective. My resignation would be effective in 90 days, 60 days, or however long, right? So I still had 2 or 3 more months to be there. And after the resignation was submitted, I'll tell you, to be honest, submitting the resignation, I think, did exacerbate some of the turmoil within the church. I think that after the resignation was submitted, not immediately after, I don't think, but shortly after the resignation was submitted, you had a crew that didn't want me to go. And I think you had a crew that were like, we good. However, internally, for me, it was like a boulder was lifted off my shoulders. And those 2-3 months were much lighter for me than my time there previously. And so things occurred between the time I submitted my resignation and the time I actually left. But my last day at the church just so happened to be Resurrection Sunday. That was my last Sunday at the church. And I left, I preached that Sunday, left the church, And I felt good. I felt good. I felt good about the decision that I made. I knew I was going to be on a faith journey. I knew that it was going to be, I knew that it was going to be, I knew that it was going to come with a lot of unexpected twists and turns, but I felt like I had done what God called me to do. Now, let me say this. Let me say this. Let me say this. Let me say this. I felt a certain type of way about how things transpired. Others felt their type of way about how things transpired. We all know that a lot of times perception is reality, okay? And sometimes we can feel certain ways about things and feel certain ways deeply, and somebody can feel the exact opposite way that we feel. Okay. And so the reason why I'm not getting into the particulars, this is what happened, and this is who said what, and this is what they did, and this is what I did, and is because at the end of the day, I felt the way I felt. They felt the way they felt. I was entitled to the way that I felt. They were entitled to the way that they felt. And this is what I concluded, right? Regardless of everything that transpired, regardless of who said what and who did what and what happened here and what happened there, this is what I concluded. That sometimes, right, it's just not a fit. Sometimes it's just not a fit. And it's okay. Have you ever interviewed for a job and you thought that you were the right person for the job? And you felt like it was a dream job. And then you got the job. And you quickly realized, maybe this ain't for me. And maybe I'm not for them. And I think the biggest driver behind all that transpired was it just wasn't a fit. Which is it my fault that it's not a fit? No, not necessarily. Is it their fault that I'm not a fit? No, necessarily. Sometimes certain temperaments, certain perspectives don't fit everywhere. Okay. And so I left that Resurrection Sunday, and I'm gonna speed up. a bit. I got a hole in my lip, y'all. I'm gonna speed up a bit. Spent 7 months after leaving the church, kind of essentially homeless, and really praying, not homeless literally, like what I mean is, I should say churchless, right? Like I wasn't worshiping in an official, like 501c3 established congregation. Still worshiping, right? And still worshiping with the community, but not really connected to an officially established congregation. 7 months. And during that time, I was praying. I was praying about, okay, well, Lord, I followed you in the resignation. Lead me now. What do I do? Do I go to somebody else's church and join? Do I plant a church? or do I candidate for a church? Never ever felt the call of God to plant a church. I had done that before in 2009, and that church plant ended in 2011. Now, I did pray, Lord, is this the direction that you want me to go into? I also met with different church planting organizations and church planting gurus as I prayed, but never felt the Lord saying, Isaiah, plant a church and pioneer your own church, organize your own church. Never felt that. I did, however, feel the Lord leading and guiding me to submit for vacant churches. And I did that. Okay. Now, again, I'm not going to go into detail. But after 7 months of sort of kind of being in the church wilderness, I was called to the church that I currently pastor. And I've been at this church now for last November made a year. And while it hasn't been perfect, what I can say is that I'm home. And where I was not the right fit for the other congregation, I believe, and I think my deacons here, I think my trustees here, I think many of the members here would agree that I'm the perfect fit here. It has been a joy to be the pastor at New Congregational Missionary Baptist Church. Now, again, not easy. Have we had some issues? Yes. However, it is clear that this is where God has called me to set up shop and do my life's work within this local congregation. Now, throughout that entire experience at the previous church, well-meaning preachers and pastors advised me, because I sought advice, I sought counsel. I don't know it all, right? I'm a work in progress. I sought advice and I sought counsel. Now, this was before I sensed the Lord saying, it's time to go. Because once I sensed the Lord saying, it's time to go, it was time to go. But prior to that, I sought counsel from a number of pastors, Black pastors. And with the exception of one, Dr. Marcus Jerkins, who pastors in Birmingham, Alabama. And y'all, I forgot to turn on the AC, and I got on this sweatshirt. I am burning up. But anyway, with the exception of one, the pastors told me, whatever you do, fight, stay. Whatever you do, don't let the church slip out of your hands. Some said, God's going to get them and you're going to bury most of them. Okay. Now, again, these were well-meaning pastors. And some of these pastors had experienced the same type of, if not worse, conflict than I was experiencing at the time. And some of these pastors actually, they had practiced what they preached. They experienced conflict, they experienced turmoil, and they dug in and they said, if we're going to fight, we're going to have to fight then. And some of them were on the other side of that. And a lot of them were telling me it was hell for 5 years, for 10 years. But then once the dust settled, it was great. And it's been gravy ever since. And so I understand their perspective. I don't want to demonize them. I don't want anybody on here to demonize those pastors that told me to fight, told me to stay, told me to put up my dukes. I don't want to demonize them because they were coming from a very genuine and honest place. But in my situation, had I heeded that advice, I certainly wouldn't be at New Congregational Missionary Baptist Church now. And I may even be dead. Now, here's the question that we're asking. Is it wrong for pastors to resign? Is it wrong? Is it wrong? And my response to that question is it's got to be a case-by-case basis. Got to be a case-by-case basis. Here, I don't want either extreme because I think either extreme is not faithful to, number one, the biblical witness and faithful to our desire to see human beings flourish. Here are the two extremes. You don't leave no matter what. If God called you there, you stay there. And because God called you there, that's where you did. God call you there. That's where you're supposed to be. You dig in and you stay there. And now we got a young guy or an old guy that's like, okay, I've been in the hospital 6 times. All right. I'm breaking out in rashes and hives. I done been cussed out in public 6, 7, 8, 9 times. But I'm gonna fight. All right. It's having a strain on my marriage, having a strain on my mental health. But you know what? Come hell or high water, I'm gonna fight. That's one extreme. Here's the other extreme. Oh yeah, I'm out. First sign of trouble. Oh, I ain't got to do what? Huh? What? Don't you understand? I got options. That's not faithful as well. That's an extreme, right? Now, however, which happens most of the time in Black churches? A or B? The I'm staying here till I die, or you know what? I've been here 1 month and deuces. Most of the time in Black churches, it's A, I'm staying here until I die. And for some, maybe even many Black pastors, this is creating a mental health, emotional health, physical health crisis. It's not productive and helpful for them, nor is it productive and helpful for the church. One of the things that my resignation did is that it didn't just give me peace, but guess what else it did? It gave the church peace. They're not fighting no more. They're not fighting against one another. They're not coming there Sunday after Sunday feeling like they have to take sides. Now, were there consequences as a result of my resignation? Yes. People left. Friendships were shattered, things of that nature. Yes. But as it stands right now, that church is still in existence. They're moving forward. And guess what? They're united. I want to show y'all a funny clip real quick. I want to show y'all a funny clip. And some of y'all might have seen this clip because I think this happened like 10, 15 years ago. But as you watch this clip, I just want you to ask the question, should the pastor have just resigned? Wouldn't it have just been better for the pastor to just resign rather than allowing things to escalate this far? Check this out.
From a minister and his congregation on the steps of a church in St. Paul, Minnesota. A fight outside the St. James African Methodist Episcopal Church was part of a long simmering feud.
Bright skies couldn't chase away clouds of contention that have gripped this church nearly 2 years, since the Reverend Hubert Armstrong was appointed its pastor by the church's national body.
We are complaining that we feel that he is a poor church administrator and has poor people skills.
Others say Reverend Armstrong is unaccountable with church funds and doesn't consult or inform members. Attendance has dropped.
They're leaving. There's nobody here. We're not getting any money. We're losing the church. We're so in debt, it's pathetic.
This weekend, several church trustees took matters into their own hands. While Reverend Armstrong was being reappointed at an AME conference, they changed the locks on church doors. He reacted today by dismissing 2 trustees. Then emotions erupted.
And you are suspended.
Well,
You're fine.
No, you don't.
Well, she hit me. He hit me. She hit him first, man.
Get out of my way.
Let it come. Let it loose.
St. Paul police officers were called to the church, but soon left when assured tempers had cooled. Later, Reverend Armstrong was handed a key. Trustees say they'll press to have Armstrong removed when the presiding elder visits in October. Pastor Armstrong vows he's not leaving.
I will serve until the bishop says.
You have your appointment.
I have my appointment. I have the incorporation of the church.
Bill Hudson reporting for CBS News.
The sheriff of a southeast Oklahoma.
He said, I'm going to stay. Now, they're an AME church. They're not a Baptist church. But he said, I'm going to stay until the bishop moves me. Hitting one of the female trustees. Did you also see the pastor like, come on, no, let the dude through. Let him through. Y'all, why even allow it to escalate to that point? Now, there may be some cases where the Lord says, you ain't going nowhere. Had the Lord told me in that hospital room, stay put, then guess what? I'd still be there. There may be some instances where all hell is breaking loose in the congregation. All hell is breaking loose in there. But God is like, look, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you better stay in that fire. And so if that is your situation, please don't use this podcast as an excuse to resign. If you know in your heart of hearts that God is saying, stick in there, then please do not implicate me in your disobedience. But then in some cases, like mine, Lord will say, get up out, time to go. Then the disobedience would be the fighting and the digging in. And then here's the reality. In some cases, God may be silent. And God may leave it up to your own discernment. You do know that God gives us minds and discernment, and he expects sometimes he's not going to tell us what to do. You do know that, right? This theology that says, hey, God is going to reveal to you everything you're supposed to do before you do it. If that's the case, then what need do I have of faith? If God is just always going to tell me, go right, go left, go up, go down, yes, no, then I don't need faith. because I've already got God telling me what to do before things even occur. Sometimes God won't say a thing. Sometimes God will not tell you yay, will not tell you nay, and he's expecting you to live out Romans 12. Can I use the King James Version? Romans 12, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your body as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable, for this is your reasonable act of worship. Verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by how? By the renewing of your mind. As your mind is renewing, then what happens? That you may be able to prove, discern, test what is the good and acceptable will of God. Sometimes, preacher, you're going to have to use your discernment. And sometimes it is discernment to say, maybe it's better for me to go. Maybe it's better. Now, what about the curious case of the calling of God? Because some of you may say, well, hold on, Isaiah. Did God call you to that church? Absolutely. I 10,000% believe he called me to that church. There's no doubt in my mind that God called me there, but it's clear now that he did not call me there for what I thought he was calling me there for. Everything that God does is purposeful, but that doesn't mean that everything that God does is revealed. I thought he was calling me there to retire from there. He certainly called me there, but it wasn't for the reason or the purpose that I thought. And God will do that sometimes, right? What do we know? What does the prophet Isaiah tell us? His thoughts are above our thoughts, his ways above our ways, right? As high as the heavens are above from the earth, that's how high his thoughts are from ours. Sometimes God will have something in mind that you don't have in mind. So yeah, I know that God called me there, but it wasn't for what I thought he called me there for. Now, hindsight is 2020, and now I feel like, okay, I feel like now I have an understanding of why he called me there. But when I first got there, I thought it was for something totally different for what it actually ended up being. And one of the texts that informed me around this was Matthew chapter 10. Matthew chapter 10. Now, before I read this text, admittedly, I want to say I'm gonna have to figure out how to turn that off, because I'm y'all know me. I'm demonstrative. I move my hands. I be off this energy drink, y'all, and this energy drink be having me herky jerky, and so I'm gonna have to figure out some type of way to disable that Zoom function. Don't listen to my fingers. Listen to me. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. Lord Jesus. I lost my train of thought. Look, Reverend, let me tell you, Doc, I done moved on up. Where was I, y'all? What was I saying? Because I lost my train of thought. Oh, the text. Thank you. Okay, the text. So I want to admit, before I read this text, I want to admit that what I'm about to share with you is not a one-to-one parallel to pastoring a local congregation. But I think that there are implications that we can glean from this text in situations where you are pastoring in conflict and you're contemplating resigning. And it's in Matthew chapter 10, Let's see, where do I want to start? I'll start in verse 5. Then Jesus sent out, these 12 Jesus sent out, instructing them, go nowhere among the Gentiles, enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse the lepers, cast out demons. You receive without paying, give without pay. Acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics, or sandals or a staff, for the laborer deserves his food. And whatever town or village you enter, find out, listen to this, verse 11, here it is. And whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it and stay there until you depart. As you enter the house, greet it. If the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet when you leave that house or that town. Truly, I say to you, it will be more bearable. Y'all know the rest of that. So notice that Jesus doesn't say, stay in that house. If they don't listen to you, stay there until they do. No, go on, shake the dust off your feet. There's another house up the road. So let me be clear as I wrap this up. I am not telling you, pastor, embattled pastor in a difficult situation. I am not telling you to leave. I am not telling you to stay. Here's what I'm telling you. Seek God. Be prayerful. Now, you might be wondering, Pastor Isaiah, when you were in the hospital, was it like an audible voice that came to you? Like, what was it? I mean, how did you know it was God? No, it wasn't an audible voice. I use my words very carefully. I said that I sensed the Lord saying, let it go, go. What does that mean? That it popped into my heart and my mind with almost like force and authority, where it was like, yeah, that's God. It wasn't an audible voice. I didn't Isaiah. No, I sensed in my heart that God was saying, because it was what I sensed in my heart was so arresting that it was clear. Okay, all right. What I'm saying to you, Pastor, in a very difficult, trying situation, is seek God. Hear from God. If God is silent, use your discernment. What will be better for your family? What will be better for the church? Don't make yourself bigger than the church. Maybe what's needed isn't obstinance and I'm going to stay. Maybe what's needed is y'all can have it. Y'all can have it. One thing I knew. The Lord called me to shepherd sheep, not fight them. Now, there are some moments when you're shepherding sheep where you have to be firm. There are some moments where when you're shepherding sheep where you know the rod and the staff, right? We know that implied in that imagery is correction, right? So yes, being firm with sheep, guiding sheep in an authoritative way, but fighting sheep, like, all right, we going at it. We cursing at the sheep or being cursed at by the sheep. That you may have to endure that, but y'all, especially if you're Baptist, but y'all know what I'm saying. Like, I knew that God called me to pastor his sheep, not chunk them. not scrap. And that's what was happening, y'all. We had meetings where things got ugly. Like, thankfully, never became physical. There was never a physical altercation, but it could have been. We had some meetings where, people got in people's faces. We had some meetings where, people got cut off and felt very offended, and like God didn't. Yeah, that's not that. Yeah, and so I want to say this to you, pastor, and then I want to talk to parishioners. I want to say this to the pastor, and I want to say this to the parishioner. Pastor, listen to me. This is God's church. It's not your church. Every local church belongs to Jesus. Every local church that's open in his name belongs to Jesus. He is the head of the church. Okay? You are not the church's savior. Jesus is. Okay? If your decision is to fight, why? Are you fighting because God is telling you to do it, or has ego taken over? And is it now, I ain't finna let nobody come at me? And okay, so pastor, understand that whatever decision you make is Jesus's church. Those the ones that are saved, those are Jesus's sheep. Okay. So I want to say that to pastors. I see my Reverend Keaton from the Mount Tabor Missionary Baptist Church. Yes. This is what I say. If you're listening to me and you're a late person, here's what I want to say to you. How are you working to be an agent of peace and unity in your church during a time of conflict? I can honestly say that in my experience, some people were exacerbating the problem, adding gasoline to the flames. Don't be one of those. Don't be one of those. It's okay to have your opinion. It's okay to have your view. How are you being an agent of peace? And let me ask this question as well, parishioner. If you can't support the pastor, why are you more committed to him leaving than you are to you leaving? I understand that we have emotional connections to our churches. I understand that leading a church can be hard. But let me talk now, particularly within the Baptist context. If the pastor was voted in by the majority of the congregation, your brothers and sisters in Christ, and if the majority of the congregation, if they have not decided to vote him out, why are you committed to staying and committed to seeing the pastor go? If you cannot support the pastor, why stay and fight him? Why? You never know what may happen. Because in my experience, I resigned and now I'm home, y'all. That could happen for you. I know that there's fear and trepidation, but you may leave and end up going to a church where you're like, oh, this is it. This is wow. And you may even say to yourself, I'm so glad I left that behind. It was hard, it was difficult, but I'm so glad. So I see questions. And I do want to respond to it. I'm glad that I got questions. I'm glad that I got questions. Here's a good question. Rightly dividing the word. What does support mean? So support means understanding the shepherd-sheep dynamic. What support does not mean is treating the pastor as if he's beyond correction and accountability. That's not support. And that's truly, honestly, one of the problems within the Black church right now is that there are far too many pastors that think that they are the head of the church. Okay. So it is not treating the pastor as if he's beyond accountability. But what it is it is understanding the sheep shepherd dynamic. And that the shepherd is tasked with feeding the sheep, which means that the sheep shouldn't be dictating to the shepherd what needs to be fed. That's the shepherd's job, to labor in the scriptures to feed the sheep. So that's one sort of practical thing, right? Also, shepherds will bring correction. Shepherds will bring guidance. Okay. So support looks like being a sheep and not trying to be a shepherd. So that's what I would say. Here's a question here. What do you mean? Hold on. Are you speaking? What? So here's a question. Are you speaking in general? What do you mean? Am I speaking in general? What do you mean? Am I speaking in general? I don't understand that question. Speaking in general about what? Yeah. So no pastor has carte blanche to just like the pastor is not the king, right? But the pastor should be followed. And dare I say, pastors should be followed. So if you want to clarify, are you speaking in general? That'd be great. But I'm kind of confused by that. I hope I've answered the question. And listen, if you find this discussion to be beneficial, if you find this discussion to be helpful, then like, share, subscribe. I appreciate your comments. But y'all, I said this yesterday on live. I am a super niche channel. Super niche, Niche. Okay. And there will be people that will see this channel as a refreshing option. And then there will be people that'll be like, I don't get it. I don't get it. If you're one of those people that see this channel as a refreshing option, please help us to grow. Help us to grow. Like, share, subscribe. I'd appreciate that. All right. I don't see any questions, any follow-up questions. Let me say this. My desire is to go live at least twice a week. At least twice a week. That is my desire, to go live at least twice a week until 2026. All right. So pray for me. I do have a little bit of extra time on my hands these days. So I have a little bit more time than I used to have. But pray for me. That's my goal. Hopefully you'll join me. When you look at my page, you'll see I already got some stuff lined up, some lives lined up that I think are interesting. Okay, here we go. Are you speaking about yourself or pastor in general? I don't know when you popped in Scriptures for Life. By the way, I think I know who you are, but I don't see your government name. I just see Scriptures for Life. But salute to you and thank you for your comments and your questions nonetheless. I gave my personal story, bits and pieces of my personal story at the beginning of this broadcast. And probably for the last, I'd say maybe 15, 20 minutes, I've been speaking more generally. Okay. So it depends on where you popped in on the broadcast. My church is in Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles, California. Thank you, Rightly Dividing the Word, for your engagement, for your questions as well. All right, y'all. I've been on for a little over an hour. I appreciate y'all sticking with me, especially those of y'all that have been here since the beginning. Like, share, subscribe, help this channel to grow. Joe, my brother Joe. That's my brother right there. God bless you, Joe. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you. All right, y'all. I will be live next week. I'm going live twice next week. You can check out my channel and you can see exactly what the topics are for next week. Invite somebody. Tell them that they need to be here. All right, y'all. Grace and peace. Bye-bye.